Ethan was a 22-year-old university student from Los Angeles, California. He'd always been curious about different cultures, and one place that fascinated him the most was the United Kingdom. From the time he was a child, he had watched movies and documentaries about the British royal family, the Queen's Guard, and the grand ceremonies held at Buckingham Palace. He loved the idea of ancient traditions still being alive in modern times. The red uniforms, shiny black boots, and the tall black fur hats worn by the guards made a strong impression on him. They stood still like statues. They never smiled. They never blinked. That mystery excited Ethan. After saving money for over a year and convincing two of his close friends, Josh and Daniel, to join him, Ethan finally booked a trip to London. It was their first time leaving the country, and the excitement was real. They wanted to try British tea, ride the famous red buses, visit the London Eye, walk around the historical streets of the city that once ruled half the world. But, most of all, Ethan wanted to see the royal guards in person. He had watched so many TikToks and YouTube videos of tourists trying to make them laugh. He thought it would be fun to try something similar. What could go wrong? The plane landed. In Heathrow Airport, Ethan looked out of the window and whispered, "Finally, London." The city welcomed them with light rain, cloudy skies, and the sound of double-decker buses. Their hotel was small but neat, located near Westminster. From there, everything was within walking distance: the Big Ben, Trafalgar Square, and even Buckingham Palace. The first few days of the trip were filled with joy. They explored British museums, ate fish and chips, and laughed at how different the accents were. Every moment was captured by Ethan on his phone. He posted stories every few hours, gaining hundreds of likes and comments. His followers were loving the travel updates. His confidence grew with every post. But Ethan wanted something bigger, something viral. He had a small dream of becoming a full-time influencer. This trip was his chance. Believed one good video could change everything. While scrolling through Instagram Reels, he saw an old clip of a tourist doing a dance next to a royal guard. The guard didn't react. The tourist got over 1 million likes. That planted an idea in Ethan's mind. He wanted to go to Buckingham Palace and do something different. Not too crazy, just funny. Something people would share. Like something unforgettable. It was on a Thursday morning when Ethan and his friends reached the gates of Buckingham Palace. The wide-open space in front of the palace was filled with tourists from around the world. People took selfies, posed near the railings, and watched the guards who marched slowly and stood at their posts. Ethan immediately spotted one guard standing near the corner of the main building. His red coat looked freshly ironed, and his tall, black hat stood perfectly straight. His face was serious. Didn't blink, didn't flinch. It was like watching a mannequin. Ethan pulled out his phone and told his friends, "Guys, record me. I'm going to make the best video of this trip." Josh asked, "You sure, bro?" "I don't think they like being bothered." Ethan laughed. "Relax. It's just for fun. People do this all the time. These guards are used to it." Daniel started recording as Ethan walked slowly toward the guard. The other tourists stepped aside, curious to see what would happen. Some pulled out their phones too. Ethan stood beside the guard and did a fake salute. No reaction. He made a funny face. Still no movement. He then began mimicking the guard's posture, feet together, hands on the side, face serious. The crowd giggled softly. Ethan grinned, knowing he had their attention. He then started talking in a loud voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the world's strongest statue. He does not move, does not breathe. He is the ultimate challenge." The crowd laughed again. Some cheered. A few people looked uncomfortable, but no one stopped him. Encouraged, Ethan took a small step closer and whispered near the guard's ear, "Hey man, blink if you're human." Nothing happened. Then Ethan pretended to sneeze loudly, hoping for some reaction. Still nothing. But Ethan wasn't done. He moved his hand up just a few inches away from the guard's face and waved it like he was testing if the man was real. That was the moment things started to shift. A small sign posted nearby clearly said, "Do not touch or obstruct the Queen's Guard." But Ethan hadn't paid attention to that. Thought the whole thing was just for show. He was wrong. The guard, without warning, suddenly stepped forward with force, raised the rifle he was holding, and shouted loudly, "Stand back from the Queen's Guard." His voice was sharp, trained, and filled with command. Before Ethan could even process the words, the guard had used the butt of the rifle to push Ethan hard in the chest. Ethan fell backward, hitting the ground with surprise all over his face. His phone flew from his hand. The crowd gasped. Some people screamed softly. Others stood frozen. The area just seconds ago filled with laughter turned quiet. The tourists near the scene were now backing away, unsure of what might happen next. Ethan lay on the ground for a second, confused and slightly hurt, both physically and emotionally. He didn't expect this. Thought the guards weren't allowed to react. As he sat up, his embarrassment started turning into anger. He shouted, "You didn't have to push me? I was just joking." But the guard had already returned to his original position, standing still, face forward, not looking at Ethan or anyone else. It was as if nothing had happened. A few police officers and palace security staff rushed over. They helped Ethan up, asked if he was hurt, and told him he had violated security rules. One officer said firmly, "You're lucky this didn't turn into something worse. These guards are not actors. They are real soldiers, trained to protect this ground." Ethan tried to argue, but the officer cut him off. "You crossed the line. This isn't a playground. You need to leave the area immediately." Meanwhile, the people in the crowd were talking, whispering, and pointing at Ethan. Some were still filming. His friends looked shocked. Josh said, "Man, that was serious." Daniel handed Ethan his phone and whispered, "This is going viral, for real." Ethan's mind was spinning. He didn't know if he should feel proud that he got attention or ashamed of what just happened. His chest was sore, but his pride was hurting even more. As they walked away from Buckingham Palace, Ethan could feel the stares. Some tourists looked at him with judgment. A few even clapped slowly, not in support, but sarcastically. One older man from Germany said to him, "You deserve that. No respect." Ethan didn't respond. He just kept walking, his earlier excitement now replaced with confusion and regret. Later that evening, as they sat in their hotel room, Ethan scrolled through his phone. The video had already been shared dozens of times. One clip had the caption, "Tourist learns a lesson from the Queen's Guard." Another said, "Respect traditions, or get corrected." Ethan's face was clearly visible in all the clips. Comments were flooding in, some laughing, some angry, some defending the guard. Josh looked at Ethan and asked, "Do you still think it was worth it?" Ethan didn't answer. He stared at the screen, the same moment repeating again and again the shout, the push, the fall, the crowd's reaction. It felt unreal. A dream trip had turned into something else entirely. Ethan lay on his bed that night, unable to sleep. He thought about how things had gone so fast. One moment he was having fun. The next he was being removed by security. He never expected the guard to respond like that. He never thought people would be so angry. He had underestimated the seriousness of the situation. He thought it was just a funny video. But now, he wasn't so sure as he stared at the ceiling. One question kept repeating in his mind. Did I go too far? The next morning, London's weather was gray, and a light rain tapped against the window of Ethan's hotel room. But inside, the atmosphere felt heavier than the weather. Ethan hadn't slept properly, kept thinking about what had happened. At Buckingham Palace, he replayed the moment again, and again the guard's sudden movement, the sharp voice, the push, and the stunned crowd. It didn't feel like real life. It felt like something from a movie. He still couldn't believe that it had happened to him. Josh and Daniel were already awake. They were scrolling through their phones in silence. Daniel looked up and said slowly, "Dude, you're everywhere." Ethan sat up on the bed and grabbed his phone. He had received hundreds of notifications overnight. People were tagging him, sending him messages, some supportive, but most of them critical. The video clip of him mocking the royal guard had gone viral. It was posted by several popular pages on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. In the video, Ethan could be seen making silly faces, pretending to touch the guard, and then getting shoved hard and falling down. Someone had added dramatic music to the clip. Others had written captions like, "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and Royal Guard does not play around." Ethan's name was now connected to this moment. The internet had decided to make him famous, but not in the way he had hoped. He opened the comments. Some people laughed at him. Others insulted him, calling him disrespectful, immature, or another tourist who thinks the world is his playground. A few people said the guard had overreacted, but most believed Ethan got what he deserved. His follower count was rising quickly, but the attention didn't feel good.
All good.
Painful. Josh looked at Ethan carefully. "You okay, man?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah. Just didn't expect it to blow up like this." Daniel added, "It's not just viral. It's serious. News pages are picking it up. Look," he showed Ethan an article headline. "American tourist disrespects Queen's Guard. Gets instant response." Another said, "Royal Guard breaks. Silence pushes back against disrespectful tourist." Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just a funny clip anymore. It had become a public event. Later that day, while they sat at a cafe near Hyde Park, Ethan got a call from a local journalist. She asked if he would like to give a short interview about the incident. Ethan hesitated but agreed. He thought maybe if he explained himself, people would understand he wasn't trying to be rude. He was nervous, but he wanted to clear the air. That evening, he met the journalist in a quiet corner of the park. Her name was Rachel, and she spoke gently but directly. "Ethan," she said, "many people are angry. They believe you disrespected a national symbol. What do you say to them?" Ethan replied, "Honestly, I didn't mean to insult anyone. I was just trying to make a funny video. I thought the guards weren't allowed to react. I've seen videos where people do things and nothing happens. I didn't touch him. I was only joking. I didn't know I was breaking a rule." Rachel nodded and asked, "But did you see the sign saying not to approach or obstruct the guard?" Ethan looked down. "Yes, I saw it later. I didn't take it seriously at the time. That was a mistake." The interview was short. Rachel posted a few clips on social media that night. Ethan hoped it would calm people down, but the response was mixed. Appreciated that he admitted his mistake. Others said he was only sorry. Because of the backlash, the internet once again had a split opinion. But the story didn't stop there. In the next 2 days, several former royal guards appeared on TV interviews and news articles. They explained their training and duty. One of them, a man named Sergeant Wallace, said, "People think we're decoration. But we're not. We are trained soldiers protecting the crown. When someone crosses a line, we are allowed to act." That. Tourists mocked a uniform that represents sacrifice and service. He's lucky it was only a push. Another former guard, Corporal Dean, said, "That young man tried to make entertainment out of our duty." There's a difference between fun and disrespect. If someone stood outside his house and mocked him, would he laugh? Those words hit Ethan hard. He watched the interviews alone at night, and for the first time, he really began to feel the weight of what he had done. It wasn't just a prank. He had offended something sacred to many people. A guard's uniform wasn't a costume. It was a symbol of discipline, history, and national pride. And he had turned it into a joke for views. The story had now crossed borders. American news channels picked it up too. A popular talk show host even joked about it, showing Ethan's fall in slow motion and laughing with the audience. That hurt even more. He wasn't in control of the story anymore. He was the punchline. Meanwhile, British authorities reviewed the situation. They decided not to press serious charges, but issued a fine for disorderly conduct in a protected area. Ethan had to pay the fine and was asked to leave the UK earlier than planned. His tourist visa was not banned, but it was marked for review if he ever applied again. The embassy gave him a warning letter explaining how close he came to a serious international issue. When he told his parents back home, they were disappointed. His mother cried. His father said, "You went halfway across the world to embarrass yourself. You're not a kid anymore." That sentence stayed with Ethan. It echoed in his mind every time he saw his name trending online back in the hotel. Ethan sat with his friends in silence. Josh finally broke it. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Ethan whispered. "I know." That night, Ethan walked alone to the palace gates once again. This time, he stayed far behind the railings, quietly watching the guards. No camera. No crowd, no jokes, just silence. He looked at the same guard post where it all happened. A new guard stood there now. He looked exactly the same, still cold, unreadable. But now, Ethan saw something different in that silence. He saw discipline. He saw responsibility. He saw something he had ignored before dash respect. He stood there for a long time. A few tourists passed by, taking photos. None of them acted like he did, and he felt ashamed, deeply ashamed. It was a hard feeling, but it was also honest. Something inside him had changed. The next morning, they packed their bags. Their flight was in the evening. As they checked out of the hotel, the receptionist smiled at Ethan awkwardly. "You're the one from the video, aren't you?" Ethan nodded, but didn't smile. "Yeah," he said quietly. The receptionist replied, "Hope you learned something, love. Not everything's for a laugh." Ethan thanked her and walked out. At the airport, more people recognized him. A man in his 30s walked up and said, "You disrespected our country, mate. Next time, don't be so full of yourself." Ethan didn't argue. He simply said, "You're right, I'm sorry." On the plane back to Los Angeles, he sat near the window, watching the clouds outside. His heart was heavy. He had dreamed of this trip for years. It was supposed to be a happy memory. Instead, it turned into a lesson he would never forget. He opened his phone and scrolled through the video again. This time, he didn't laugh. He didn't feel proud. He saw a young man who didn't understand boundaries. A young man who had let his desire for attention blind him to basic respect. He saw his own mistake clearly, and it hurt. The clip would live on the internet forever. That was the worst part. But maybe it was also a reminder, not just for him, but for others too. A reminder that jokes can go too far, that not every place is a stage. That respect isn't something you play with as the plane crossed the Atlantic. Ethan sat back, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Never again." By the time Ethan landed back in Los Angeles, his life had changed more than he had expected. What started as a small prank during a vacation had turned into something bigger, something that followed him home. As he stepped out of the airport, with his luggage, the first thing he saw was a group of people standing near the exit. Some were holding phones, pointing at him. A girl whispered loudly to her friend, "That's the guy who got hit by the Royal Guard." Ethan felt a mix of shame and anger. He pulled his cap low to hide his face and walked quickly past them. He wanted to disappear, but it was too late. His face was already known across the internet. Even before he reached his home, he had been turned into a meme, a lesson, and a joke, depending on who was watching. At home, his parents gave him a long, silent stare. They had already seen the videos, the news stories, and the comments. His father didn't even speak to him at first. His mother asked only one question, "Why, Ethan?" He had no answer. He went to his room, dropped his bags, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the guard's shout still echoed in his mind. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed that things around him had shifted. His friends back in college messaged him, some laughed, some supported him, and a few even criticized him. One friend wrote, "Man, what were you thinking? You're on every news page, and not in a good way." Another sent him a meme of himself, falling with the caption, "Instant regret." Ethan didn't reply to any of them. He just kept scrolling through his phone, reading the comments. Trying to figure out how everything went so wrong. His video was everywhere. News websites, reaction channels, even comedians on late-night shows were talking about it. One YouTuber made a 10-minute video titled "Why This Tourist Deserved It," explaining how disrespecting other cultures was never funny. Another created a mock trailer called "Revenge of the Queen's Guard," using clips of Ethan and action music. In the background, even though some people were laughing, Ethan wasn't. He tried to log into his social media, hoping to post a message explaining his side. But the situation had already spiraled out of control. His follower count had doubled, but most of them weren't true followers. They were there for the drama. His inbox was filled with hate messages. Some were mean, some were threatening, and some were just cruel. One message said, "Hope you never travel again." Another wrote, "You embarrassed your whole country." Ethan's heart sank, reading them. He realized he had become famous, but not for the right reasons. A week after his return, Ethan got an email from a popular American talk show asking him to appear for a short interview. He felt nervous but decided to go. He thought maybe this was his chance to tell people what really happened, to explain that it was all a mistake. When he reached the studio, he was taken to a small dressing room. A producer told him, "Just be honest. People want to know who you really are." The host of the show was known for mixing comedy with serious topics. As the show began, the host welcomed Ethan with a smile, then played the video clip on a giant screen behind them. The audience laughed. Ethan smiled weakly, trying not to. "Show how much it hurt," the host asked. "So, Ethan, tell us what went through your mind when you decided to poke fun at the Queen's Guard." Ethan replied carefully, "Honestly, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I just thought it would be funny. I saw other videos online. I thought the guards never reacted. Didn't think it was serious." The host raised an eyebrow and said, "But there's a sign that says not to go near them. You saw that, right?" Ethan looked down and nodded. "Yes, I saw it later. I was wrong. I admit that now." The audience grew quiet. The host leaned forward and asked, "Do you regret what you did?" Ethan replied, "Yes, I regret it completely. Not just because I got pushed or because it went viral. I regret not respecting something that meant so much to others. I was chasing attention. I forgot to be respectful." The interview was short, but it was honest. That night, Ethan received a few kind messages from people saying they appreciated his apology. But many others still mocked him, saying he only apologized because of the backlash. The internet wasn't so quick to forgive. Over the next month, things got more serious. Ethan's college held a meeting with him. The dean said, "As a student representing this institution abroad, your actions reflect on us. We'll not suspend you, but this will go on your record. We expect better behavior in the future." Ethan nodded quietly, didn't argue. His sponsors also began pulling out. Ethan had been working with small brands on social media clothing lines, phone accessories, and travel products. But after the incident, they stopped replying to his emails. One brand sent a message saying, "We are ending our partnership due to recent events. Our values do not align." Ethan felt like he had lost everything he was building. He thought being funny and bold would make him successful. But now, all it gave him was shame, silence, and a broken image. One night, while walking through his neighborhood, Ethan passed a bookstore. He noticed a small group of people inside an event was happening. Curious, he stepped in. A British author was giving a talk about cultural respect while traveling. The topic? Why some places are not for entertainment? Ethan sat in the back, quietly listening. The author told a story about a family who visited Japan. The father bowed to every local person he met. His son asked, "Why do you keep bowing?" The father replied, "Because it's not my country, it's theirs. When you enter someone else's home, you show respect." Those words struck Ethan deeply. After the talk, he waited until the crowd left, then approached the author. "I'm the tourist from the Royal Guard video," he said softly. The author didn't seem surprised. He looked at Ethan kindly and said, "And what did you learn?" Ethan replied that not everything is a joke. Some things should be respected even if they look strange to you, and that I was wrong. The author smiled. Then it wasn't all for nothing. After that night, Ethan started changing the way he posted online. He deleted old prank videos, stopped making fun of things he didn't understand, and began sharing stories from his travels that focused on learning instead of mocking. His follower count dropped at first, but the people who stayed were supportive. They liked the new Ethan, more thoughtful, more aware, more humble. He also wrote a long post. Not as an excuse, but as a reflection. He titled it, "What I Learned from a Push." In the post, he wrote about his mistake, the internet storm, and the painful lessons he had to learn in public. The post went viral too, but in a different way. Teachers shared it in schools, travel. Bloggers mentioned it in their videos. Even a British news site wrote an article titled, "Tourist Who Mocked Royal Guard Finds Redemption." It took time, but slowly, people started to see Ethan as more than just the kid who got shoved by a guard. He became an example of how people can make mistakes, learn from them, and grow. Still, he never forgot the moment at Buckingham Palace. It stayed with him not as a badge of shame, but as a turning point. He had gone to London chasing likes, and returned with a lesson he would carry for life. He still traveled, but now he traveled differently. He walked with respect, listened more than he spoke, and never again treated a uniform or a tradition as a joke. And whenever someone asked, "Him, are you that guy from the Guard video?" he smiled gently and said, "Yes, I was. But I'm not that guy anymore." A few months had passed since Ethan's return from London, but the memory of that one moment outside Buckingham Palace still followed him everywhere. The internet had moved on to new stories, new scandals, and new jokes, but for Ethan, the damage was still very real. He had tried to rebuild his life quietly, staying away from the spotlight, posting less on social media, and spending more time thinking about the consequences of his actions, even though he had apologized publicly. Even though many people accepted his words, the mistake remained part of his identity. He couldn't walk into a room full of strangers without wondering if someone had seen the video. Couldn't post a picture online without someone commenting, "Aren't you the guy who got hit by the Royal Guard?" It had become a label, a shadow that refused to leave him. His university allowed him to continue his studies, but it was clear that some of his professors looked at him differently now. One professor, during a lecture on cultural ethics, even used his story as an example without mentioning his name. But the message was clear. Ethan sat quietly in the back of the classroom, listening, feeling a mix of shame and responsibility. He knew he had become a lesson to others. His social media accounts had changed too. Before, he used to post funny videos, travel clips, and silly jokes. Now, his posts were more serious photos of places he visited with thoughtful captions, stories of people he met, and honest reflections about his journey. Some people stayed and supported him. Others left. But for the first time, Ethan didn't care about numbers. He cared about meaning. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. He received an email from a well-known cultural conference that was held every year in New York. The subject line said, "Invitation to speak, cultural boundaries and digital responsibility." At first, he thought it was a mistake. Why would anyone want him to speak? But when he opened the email, he saw that the organizers had been following his story. They said they believed his experience could help others understand the dangers of turning everything into entertainment. They wanted him to share what he had learned, not as a hero, but as someone who had made a mistake and grown from it. Ethan hesitated. He didn't feel ready, wasn't sure if people would take him seriously. But after a long night of thinking, he replied and said yes. A few weeks later, he stood backstage at the conference hall. The room was full of students, educators, and travelers. Everyone was waiting to hear from speakers around the world. When Ethan's name was announced, there was a moment of silence. Few people whispered. Some recognized him right away. But Ethan walked on stage with calm steps. He didn't wear anything flashy. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just stood in front of the microphone and began speaking. "My name is Ethan Carter," he said. "And some of you may know me as the guy who disrespected a royal guard and got pushed to the ground." A few people laughed nervously. "Not proud of that moment," he continued. "But I'm here today to tell you what that moment taught me on how one small action, done without thinking, can change your life in ways you never imagined." He spoke for 20 minutes. He didn't use slides, didn't need special effects. He just told the truth. About how he ignored a simple sign. About how he wanted likes and views more than understanding. About how it felt to be laughed at, hated, judged by millions of people. Most importantly, he spoke about how that one mistake opened his eyes to the importance of respect for culture, for history, and for people who dedicate their lives to service. When he finished, the audience was quiet. Then slowly, they began to clap. It wasn't the loud kind of clapping that people give for celebrities. It was the kind of clap people give when they truly feel something. Ethan stepped off the stage with a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time-piece. After the talk, many people came up to him. Some said thank you. Some shared their own stories of mistakes. One girl told him, "Your story made me realize that we're all trying to impress people online, but we forget who we're hurting in the process." Another man said, You could have disappeared. But instead, you faced it. That takes guts. Smiled and shook their hands. He didn't feel famous anymore. Felt human. In the days that followed, the video of his speech was posted online. People watched it, shared it, and for the first time the comments were filled with kindness. Wrote, "This guy really changed." Others said, "We need more people like him speaking truth." A few even admitted they had judged him too quickly and were glad to see his growth. Ethan didn't let it go to his head. He stayed grounded. He knew he had to keep learning, keep growing, and keep reminding himself of the line he had once crossed. One day, he received a message from someone he never expected, the very same journalist from London. Rachel, who had interviewed him months ago in the park. She wrote, "I saw your talk. You've come a long way. If you ever visit the UK again, I'd love to interview you again, this time about your journey." Ethan felt something shift in his heart. He hadn't thought about returning to London. He had avoided the idea. But now, maybe it was time. He booked a trip, not for content, not for attention, but for closure. This time, he traveled alone. No camera crew. No silly plans. It's just one small backpack and a quiet heart. When he arrived in London, the city looked the same. The gray skies, the busy streets, the red bus, as it all felt familiar. But Ethan was not the same person. He walked slowly through the streets, visiting museums, cafes, and quiet corners of the city. He didn't film anything. He just observed. He listened. He watched how people moved, how they respected space, how they carried history in their everyday lives. Finally, on a rainy afternoon, he stood once again in front of Buckingham Palace. The place where everything had changed, the gates were still there. The guards stood tall and still, just like before. A few tourists took photos. One or two tried to be funny, but security quickly reminded them to step back. Ethan stayed behind, the line standing silently. He looked at the guard not with curiosity, not with the desire to make a video, but with deep respect. He didn't try to get close. He didn't say a word. He just stood there for a while, letting the rain fall on his shoulders. After a few minutes, he turned around and started walking away. But before he left, he looked back one last time and whispered quietly, "Thank you." Later that evening, he met with Rachel at a quiet cafe near the Thames River. She was surprised to see how much he had changed. Said, more mature. Ethan smiled. "I had to grow up. That push woke me up." They talked for an hour. Rachel asked about his life, his speech, and what message he would give to other young people. Ethan thought for a moment and replied, "Don't chase attention. Chase understanding. And remember, not everything is meant for your entertainment." Rachel wrote the article and published it under the title, "The Tourist Who Learned Respect, A Story of Change." It wasn't a headline that screamed for clicks, but it was honest. When Ethan flew back home this time, he felt different. The trip wasn't for fame, it was for healing. And he had found it. He continued his studies, started volunteering with cultural exchange programs, and even worked with a travel group that educated young tourists about respect while visiting new places. He shared his story not to scare them, but to guide them. And slowly, people stopped calling him the guy who got hit. Now they knew him as the guy who learned and changed. It took one mistake to wake him up. It took a journey to help him grow. But in the end, Ethan didn't just travel the world. He traveled into himself and found something better than fame. He found wisdom. After returning from his second trip to London, Ethan felt a deep change inside him. The push from the Royal Guard, the viral video, the harsh lessons, and the quiet moments of reflection had all shaped a new person. He no longer cared about internet fame or making people laugh at the expense of others. Instead, he was focused on growing as a person, learning respect, and sharing what he had learned with others. Ethan started by making a new video, but this time it was very different. From his old pranks, sitting in a quiet room with a simple background, he spoke honestly to his followers. He apologized once again, not just for the mistake, but for the attitude he had before. He talked about how he had been careless, chasing attention without thinking about others. He shared how the experience had changed his views on respect, culture, and responsibility. In the video, Ethan said, "I want to tell everyone who watches this, respect is more important than likes. You can't make a joke about everything, especially things that mean a lot to people. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I hope my story helps others think twice before acting." He posted this video quietly, without asking for shares or likes. His surprise, the response was warm. Many people appreciated his honesty. Comments poured in from all over the world, saying things like, "Thank you for admitting your mistake. This is the kind of change we need, and your story is a lesson for all of us." Some followers sent private messages, sharing their own stories of mistakes and growth. Ethan realized he was no longer just a boy who had made a mistake. He was becoming a voice for respect and learning. As the weeks passed, Ethan took more steps to repair his image and build a better future. He contacted schools and universities, offering to speak to students about the importance of cultural respect when traveling. He didn't want to just tell a story, he wanted to teach a lesson. At first, some places were hesitant to invite him. But after reading his speech and watching his videos, many agreed. Ethan's talks became popular. He shared how easy it was to get caught up in social media, to forget that behind every tradition, every uniform, and every culture were real people with deep feelings. He spoke about the Royal Guard incident as a turning point in his life, and he encouraged young people to think before acting, to respect others, and to see the world with open eyes and an open heart. At the same time, Ethan grew personally. He took courses on cultural history and ethics. He traveled carefully, always learning first, laughing second. He made friends from many countries, learning about their customs, their stories, and their values. This new Ethan was curious, humble, and thoughtful. One day, while visiting a cultural festival in his hometown, Ethan met a man who introduced himself as a former British soldier who had served as a Royal Guard. The man smiled warmly and said, "I heard your story. It takes courage to admit mistakes. It takes even more courage to change." They talked for hours, sharing stories and learning from each other. The former guard told Ethan about the pride they felt wearing the red coat and bearskin hat and how they respected everyone who respected their duty. Ethan listened carefully. Feeling gratitude for this chance to connect, Ethan also started volunteering with travel organizations that promoted responsible tourism. He helped create guides for tourists about cultural sensitivity and proper behavior at historic sites. His experience made him a powerful messenger because he had lived the consequences himself. Meanwhile, the viral video remained online, but now it was accompanied by new content: Ethan's apology, his speeches, and stories of growth. For many people, it became a symbol not just of a mistake, but of the possibility to change. One evening, Ethan sat alone, scrolling through messages. He found one from a young woman in England. She wrote, "Thank you for your honesty. Your story helped me understand how easy it is to forget respect when we want attention. I'm going to share your talks at my school." Ethan smiled and replied, "Thank you. That means a lot." As time went on, Ethan's life became quieter but richer. He found joy in small moments, traveling without cameras, meeting new friends, learning about the world with respect. He no longer sought fame, he sought understanding. His family, once disappointed, now supported him. They saw how much he had grown. His friends noticed the change too. They often told him, "You're not the same guy from the video. You're better." Ethan knew that the path wasn't easy. The past was always there, a reminder of what could go wrong. But it was also a reminder of how far he had come. He often thought back to that day outside Buckingham Palace, the sudden push, the silence afterward, the shocked crowd. At the time, it had felt like the worst moment of his life. He saw it as the moment that saved him from himself. In the end, Ethan's story was not just about a tourist who got hit by a guard. It was about a young man who made a mistake, faced the consequences, and chose to grow. It was about the power of respect, the dangers of chasing attention without care, and the hope that people can change if they truly try. And that hope stayed, with Ethan guiding him as he continued to explore the world, not as a joke, but as a learner, a listener, and a respectful traveler.